Welcome everyone, this is Carl Dreher, and I am speaking to you from the library in the Keith House of the John C. Campbell Folk School. On New Year's Eve, Nick Kelichek and I conducted a Zoom presentation of a New Year's Eve celebration here at the Folk School using videos we've had from past New Year's Eves. We've got an awful lot of requests to record it again and allow the folk school to put it on their website. So that's what we're doing here. So this is an encore presentation. At about 3 o'clock on New Year's Eve, all the dancing would stop, and a whole army of work studies would descend upon the community room at Keith House. And they would be in there decorating it and hanging sparklers and tinsel and lights and everything else to just turn it into a beautiful, beautiful evening ballroom for the evening's dance. Usually at that point, the students here would then go home and take a nap because they knew there was going to be a long evening ahead of them. Around 6 o'clock, we would all gather then at the dining hall, and everyone usually was dressed up really nice for a very nice evening dinner with tablecloths and candles set out. There'd be a more elaborate blessing for the evening, and everyone would have a wonderful, wonderful dinner. Then we would go from there to the basement of Keith House, where there'd be singing and maybe little skits or presentations or something like that. At 8 o'clock, everyone would then walk up the stairs, and making sure that they ducked so they wouldn't grouse, to the Keith House, and the doors would be, community room, excuse me. The doors would be flung open, and there'd be an awe and a gasp of surprise at how wonderful the hall looked. Before we take you any further, though, I'm going to introduce Bob Dolsmer, who was the Director of Music and Dance at the Folk School for many years, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the history of Winter Dance Week and the New Year's Eve celebration. So please welcome Bob.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Dolsmer, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual celebration of New Year's Eve at the John C. Campbell Folk School in Brasstown, North Carolina. Traditionally, New Year's Eve is the festive culmination of our Winter Dance Week, a glorious week of nonstop dance and song that started in 1980. I've been lucky enough to attend more than 30 of the 39 years, and this would have been number 40. Before Winter Dance Week, the folk school was closed to students between mid-November and early March. But there were some community activities around the holiday season that took place, including a children's party and an old folks party, which have continued. And at one time, there was even a Boar's Head feast featuring madrigal singing and early music. Winter Dance Week began at a time when Berea's Christmas Country Dance School in Kentucky was increasingly overbooked and had to turn away many folks who wanted to register. Berea actually encouraged other groups to start competing events around the same time to take the pressure off the Christmas school. The folk school decided to take up the challenge, and Jim Morrison was enlisted to organize the first one. Jim's vision was to have a week similar to Berea's, but smaller and more intimate due to the size limitations of the community room, and featuring only American dance and music, much like American Dance and Music Week at Pinewoods, which Jim had founded in the mid-1970s. The Folk School's Week proved very popular and has continued over the past, now 40 years. I succeeded Jim as program coordinator, working with Laura Sprung. And then a decade later, when I moved to Brasstown and began my job as music and dance coordinator at the Folk School, I determined to add English country, Morris, and sword to the program, and so it has remained ever since. In the early years, dancers wrote complaints on their evaluation forms, too much English. In more recent years, the complaints have been not enough English. My vision for the New Year's Eve program was largely influenced by Christmas Country Dance School at Berea, where I was first introduced to country dancing in 1969, and attended several times thereafter, both as a dancer and a teacher. At Berea, Pat Napier always called the last dance before midnight an Appalachian big circle that he would wind up into the middle of the hall just at midnight. And then the first dance of the new year was always Sellinger's Round. We just continued the Berea tradition, adding a few touches of our own. A balloon drop at midnight, and then a break after midnight for everyone to go outside so that the Brasstown Brigade could fire off their black powder muskets and bless the new year. The balloon drop originally included confetti, but this varied over the years. At one point, many adults complained about the local children noisily popping the balloons just after they were dropped. So for several years, only confetti was dropped and no balloons. But then the fire marshal declared that the confetti was a fire hazard because some always landed on the light fixtures in the rafters. So it was back to balloons and balloons only. Let me tell you a little story about the balloon drop. Before Jan Davidson became director, he and his wife Nanette would often attend the New Year's Eve dance with their children. And their oldest, John Neal, would go with the other kids to drop the balloons at midnight from the third floor. When Jan was hired as director, he and Nanette sat down with the kids and asked how they would feel moving from Webster, North Carolina to Brasstown. John Neal allowed as how he would miss his friends and his school, but said that if he got to drop the balloons on New Year's Eve, then it was fine with him. So enjoy tonight's program, courtesy of Carl Dreher, Nick Kelishek, and the Folk School program staff, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you, Bob. During the evening at breaks, we would have performances from the Morris teams that are part of the community, the Brasstown community. One of the Morris teams is Rural Felicity, a Garland team. And here's Nanette Davidson to tell you about the history of Rural Felicity.
Hey, Nanette Davidson here. Carl has brought me down to the music room in the Davidson Hall to talk about the Morris portion of the music and dance program here at the Folk School, particularly the Rural Felicity Garland team, which was started in 1983, and Dames Rock at Northwest Clogmores that started in 2006. I've been around for a long time. I've been dancing on the community room floor since I was about 17. And I loved watching the amazing live music that has been part of our folk school program and has enabled us to do so many things here that are really special and wonderful. Music is a superpower, and we've been able to bring out the creative energy in so many folks by teaching them this style of very jubilant street performance. So Laura Sprung, who was the music and dance coordinator in the mid-70s at the Folk School, recognized that there was kind of a renaissance of Morris dance both in England and in the United States, and she got together with several other people in the area, Pamela Corley over in Berea, Kentucky, and determined that the Northwest style of Garland dancing from the Lancashire region of England, which was done in wooden clogs, would be a fun thing to introduce to the female dance community here in Brasstown. And we got together with Laura and traced our feet on paper patterns on the floor and ordered wooden clogs from England and began to learn this pretty intricate form of Morris dance, which was not just traditionally for women. Men did this style of dance as well, but we had an all-female team. And we practiced weekly. Laura provided music herself. She was learning how to play the accordion. And we had probably 15 women that were part of that group. Some of them are still dancing with the team today, including Rosemary Kelishek, who's in her 80s now. It was funny because Rosemary was about 40 when she joined the team, and she thought she was too old at that point because the rest of us were in our 20s, and she has outdanced us all. It was great fun. We performed for the opening of the Bidstrup House here at the Folk School, which was built in about 1983. We did a lot of fall festival performances, and we traveled somewhat. We went to Vermont to dance at a big Morris sale there. And eventually Laura left the folk school and moved away, but the Garland team continued to perform. And in the early years, probably 3 or 4 years after they started dancing, they gave up the wooden clogs. We gave up the wooden clogs and moved to soft shoe dancing. And at that point, the Northwest style kind of morphed into a more sort of American kind of Garland style. We used a lot of traditional dances, particularly English country dances, as ways to learn new dances and incorporate new dance styles. So the Garland is a hoop that is decorated with ribbons or flowers or some kind of greenery and held in both hands, raised high, and there's lots of formations that are done with those. A variety of different people led the Garland team after Laura left. Nancy Anna Lefevre, who was also a music and dance coordinator, was in charge of the team for a while. And Kathy Wright led the team for a while. And then when my husband Jan became the director here at the Folk School in 1992, I rejoined the Garland team and later stepped in to help run the team when Kathy Wright left. So I was a founding member, but then I stepped out for quite a few years to raise kids when we lived away, but I was delighted to come back. And one of the things that gave the Garland team kind of new energy was this amazing group of Morris Dance musicians that we had here in Brasstown. Some of them were already Morris musicians, and some of them became Morris musicians when they got here, but they were all professionals. They really understood how to play for rhythm and how to excite the audience with their musical style. So these professional musicians knew what it took, and we were able to just work with random individuals and bring out their best and teach them how to be performance dancers in a variety of settings. We have had all kinds of costumes. We're girls and we like to wear different clothes. So I've worked on a lot of the costumes. We call them kits, and they include a pin-over or a vest, a kind of a flowy dress, some of the vests laced up. We were not truly mimicking the kind of Industrial Revolution style of costume that a lot of the British Northwest Morris dancers wear, but we incorporated quilt squares, and we had a lot of hand-dyed fabrics and scarves and things like that to reflect our fiber community that we have here. So many of the dancers were weavers or spinners or knitters or surface design artists, so we were able to use all those different skills in creating the kits that we love to wear. Very colorful kits.
Thank you, Nanette. So here's a presentation by Rural Felicity from 2006, and you'll notice the costumes they're wearing and how many people are in it. And then we'll follow it by another presentation in 2009 when by that time they had changed outfits. So please enjoy these.
ladies and gentlemen, the world is the Garland Dance.
Welcome Nanette back again, and she's going to tell you about one of our other Morris teams. This is Dames Rocket, which is a Northwest Clog Morris team here in Brasstown. They would also do a performance, and this one is from 2014. So after Nanette's introduction, we'll just play the video. Thank you.
So the Garland team was doing fine, but there were lots of young women who had come into Brasstown. A lot of them were work-study students, and they stayed after they finished their work-study stint at the folk school. And they were all interested in doing some kind of performance dance, but the Garland style was not particularly their cup of tea. And I had just gotten back from another big trip to England. The Brasstown Morris dancers have traveled to the UK multiple times to dance on the streets over there with lots of other Morris dancers in incredible ale events where teams come together and just perform on the streets. And I had been reminded of the Northwest style that the British women were doing and kind of fell in love with it all over again. So I got out our box of wooden clogs that we had kept, even though we hadn't worn them for 20 years. And I started to learn some of these dances that I had videoed while I was in England in 2005. And I was thinking, I think we could pull this off. So I recruited quite a few of those young women who were loitering about and asked them if they wanted to try out the wooden clog version of Northwest style of dancing. And they did, so we spent a summer learning some dances that I had filmed, and it just kind of took off. And so in 2006, Dames Rocket, Northwest Morris, was born. And over the years, we've been dancing now for about 14 years. We've probably had maybe 40 women dance through the team. Some of them can only stay for a while, and some of them have been dancing since the very beginning. And our style involves short sticks, ribbons, hankies. We do some percussive foot dancing. We have tiddlers that are slings. We've learned a variety of different dances, and I ran the team for, I don't know, about 12 or 14 years. And then I asked Annie Fain Leiden, Barrelon, who had also been the music and dance coordinator here at the folk school after Bob retired. We couldn't keep him forever, although we wanted to. Annie Fain did a brilliant job, and she's a very energetic young dancer and has danced with other Northwest teams, Loafer's Glory in Asheville, and has taught percussive dance, clogging, and everything. I asked her to step in and become our squire, which is the leader of the team. So she is doing that now. We've been on a little break here for the past 6 months or so, and we're all just itching to get back to it. But we have traveled to England a number of times and continue to adopt dances that we see there. We've also had some British teams ask us about our versions of the dances that we have kind of made our own. Annie Fain has choreographed some new dances for us that are fabulous. So we just look forward to continuing on with as many local musicians as we can rope in to be our dance band.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do that in just a second. Would you welcome, please, Dames Rocket?
Morris team we have here in Brasstown is Sticks in the Mud Border Morris. And to tell you about them is Martha Owen.
Hello, I'm Martha Owen, and I bring you greetings from New Year's at the John C. Campbell Folk School. It's kind of a quiet New Year's here, but it gives us plenty of time to pause and reflect on all the great deeds we have done. I'm the leader, I guess, after a fashion, of the Sticks in the Mud, and you're going to see a couple performances by us that Carl has hand-selected. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One thing is, we had our start with the inspiration of a guy named Fred Ward, who came to the folk school as a host, and he's from England. And Fred is very proud of the fact that wherever he has lived, mostly around England, he started some form of dance, whether it was square dancing or line dancing or cowboy kicks or whatever. He always wanted to start. And he came here and he was a host, which meant he set up chairs and swept floors and did announcements at meals. But he also had this melodeon, and we started playing music with him. We got to know him better and better, and we always had wanted to do some vigorous form of dancing that was, well, a little colorful, let's say. So he started us off inspired by the Shropshire Bedlam, so you'll have to go and look them up. And we made rag coats. I'm sitting on my rag coat here because weavers made the coats that there were many more rags. They're very hot in the summertime. In England, it's very cold all the time, so coats like this are great. And we made bell pads, and because we are at the folk school, we made felt hats, and each one, mine's decorated with things of my interest, so there's a lot of spinning and knitting on my hat. And we had a long talk about what we should do, and we, in England, not anymore, but traditionally your faces were painted black. We just didn't feel like we could do that in America, and so we ended up painting our faces blue, and I was not willing to paint my face blue this morning. If you were here, I would have done it, but you're not, so I'm just going to talk about it. Blue, the color of my shirt, and this shirt is the logo of all the teams that have come here to dance, and we made it before we went to England. So we've traveled to England several times. We have gained more possession of more of the style, and we are Sticks in the Mud, S-T-I-X in the Mud, Border Morris. We are Border Morris dancers because we decided that it didn't take a lot of skill. It took a lot of flair, and we didn't have to leave the ground very high. Most of us were over 40 when we started, and I can't remember exactly when we started, but I was quite a bit slimmer and more flighty at that time. And let's see, you're going to see a couple dances. One, Carl remembers, which is Beginning of the World, which we saw when we were in England. And now, with the internet especially, you can find all kinds of sources for these different things. And I think Julie Schreiber wrote to the people that created that dance in England, and then it came here and we danced it. And we don't know what the other dance is, but you'll see on New Year's, we had a level of excitement and reunion because we had stopped practicing probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks before. And then we'd be a little bit nervous about performing for what we considered the best trained dancers in America today. Those were the people that came for Winter Dance Week. But what I always found was a great atmosphere of love. And we danced higher and jumped and screamed and had a great time. So, oh yes, and why are we called Sticks in the Mud? All I can say is we fought and fought over what the name should be, but it was a very rainy year, and what I have found is that we are in fact sticks in the mud. So enjoy your dance.
We are Sticks in the Mud. From Brasstown.
Morris dancers. And you ask which border? Some would say the border between England and Wales. We would say the border between North Carolina and Georgia. We are about to perform for you a dance for the very first time tonight. We're celebrating the new year. It's called the beginning of the world. Get it right.
The other team that you have been watching is the Sticks in the Mud Morris team. We have been dancing here some 10 years. This type of dancing goes back to the 13th and 14th century in England, they say. On the border between England and Wales. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll put your hands together.